Shabbat Shalom. Extra points to everyone who braved, there's no storm outside, but who braved the conditions to make it to shul this morning. It's not just any ordinary Shabbat. This is a special Shabbat called Shabbat Zahure, which takes place before Purim. A reminder that the Megillah is read on Monday night. It looks like we begin there's a carnival for kids that starts at 4:30 on Monday, and then Megillah reading will be at around 7 o'clock. I believe here in the chapel. We come in costumes at 7 o'clock. We're going to have our Megillah reading, and then in the morning, starting at 7:30 a.m., that's when Shacharit is, and the Megillah is read again in the morning, Tuesday morning, beginning 7:30, and there'll be a beautiful breakfast following the reading. And then an important mitzvah on Purim is to have a Suda, a special meal, and we have a wonderful Suda plan with a movie that begins at 5:30. That's Tuesday at 5:30 p.m., beginning with Mincha and a deli dinner. That's Sudat Purim. And Mariv, the movie is called La Estrella Roja, the red rose, the red star. And help me, what is the relationship to Purim? It's
a mockumentary. And it's a surprise.
It's a surprise. It's a mockumentary, but there is a relationship to the Purim story. Okay, there's a relationship to Purim. So come see it at 5:30 Tuesday afternoon. So why do we have a special Shabbat like this before Purim? We read from the second scroll today, the Zahle reading, which is a biblical commandment to remember what the Amalekites did to our ancestors as they wandered in the wilderness. Well, both Purim and the story of the Amalekites remind us of a time when Jews had to take up arms to defend themselves from their enemies, that our enemies are real, that we need to be conscious of that, and aware that there are those who seek our destruction. For anyone who has been paying attention to current events in Israel in the past few weeks, the sentiments that are provoked by Parashat Zahure and by Purim should not be difficult to understand or sympathize with. We're thinking about a historical time, two historical times when Jews were under attack. Well, before our eyes, in our time, in Israel, we are seeing Jews under attack, murdered in cold blood with their guard down. This Shabbat we should be mindful of and pray especially for the families who are spending this Shabbat mourning the deaths of their murdered children. 3 families that I'm aware of lost children in the past few weeks. The Paley family, 2 brothers, young brothers, were killed in a ramming attack. The Yaniv family, also 2 brothers. The Ganelis family, an American family. The heartbreak of these families and the pain that they feel this Shabbat really ought to be shared by all of us. When I was in Israel a couple of weeks ago, I visited the Shiva for one of these families, the Pele family, who lost 2 children in that ramming attack in Jerusalem. Their father, Avraham, was also seriously injured in the attack, and he woke up from his coma just a couple of days ago, and will likely make a full recovery, which is the good news. The bad news is the first thing he was told when he woke up from his coma is that his two children did not make it. So he's sitting Shiva now, and actually I'm working with the One Family Fund to raise some needed money for the Pale family because of all the difficulties that this situation has placed on them. And if anyone either here or who's watching on the live stream is interested in helping this family, please come find me and let me know. What I would share with you is that I go to many, many shivas. It's like 50% of my job. But the grief at this shiva, in that space for the Pele family, symbolized by a mother, a young mother, holding up the picture of and clinging to it of her 6-year-old and 8-year-old son. The grief in that space is really unimaginable. And there's no question that our solidarity with this poor family leads us to embrace the relevance and the importance of Shabbat Zaħor. I would say that in many ways this is a moment, this reading, that seems to fit perfectly with how we're feeling inside. Don't lose sight of your enemies. Remember the obligation to take vengeance for what was taken from us. Shabbat Zaħor singles out the particular evil of those who prey on the weak and demands that we identify our enemies and that we blot them out from the face of the earth. But this week we saw something else. We didn't just see the murder of innocent Jews. We also saw a great desecration of God's name committed by Jews against weak and defenseless people. On Sunday night, as you may have heard, as many as 400 young Jews marched on the Palestinian city of Hawara after the killing of the 2 Yaniv brothers in that same place earlier that day. They burned cars and houses, and many Palestinian families had to be rescued by the Israeli Defense Forces in fear of their lives. IDF Major General Yossi Fuchs, in charge of West Bank operations, described the violence in Hawara as, quote, a pogrom committed by Jews, and admitted that his soldiers had been caught off guard by the size of this rampage. A video circulating on social media showed the perpetrators, who were donning kippot and tzitzit, pausing to daven Mariv as the flames rose and the buildings burned. In their minds, they were fulfilling the biblical commandment that we just read. Take revenge on your enemies. They may have even felt the triumphant echoes of the Megillah, Vaya'asu v'sonehem kirtzonam. The Jews dealt with their enemies as they saw fit. In reality, though, They were reminding us about the real essence of the war against Amalek. An idea that I want to submit today, and that is that truly only a hair's breadth separates Israel, separates us from our arch enemy. The preying on the weak, the loss of moral compass, the pursuit of power without restraint or protocol, these are Amalekite tendencies that are latent within all of us. And according to a close reading of the Bible and the Midrash, they are latent particularly within the Jewish people. And I'd like to cite 3 sources for this idea. First, there are 2 accounts in the Torah of the desert battle with Amalek. We read one this morning and another from the book of Exodus on the morning of Purim. Actually, this reading, this one this morning, is far more interesting because although both the reading from the book of Dvarim and the one from the book of Shmot talk about the war, the spin that this morning's reading places on the war is unique. It uses an unusual phrase to make claims about Amalek's particular cruelty. The Torah said, Vayizanev becha. Vayizanev becha. He attacked you from the back. In Hebrew, the tail of an animal is called the zanav. The use of those words, only found in this morning's survey of the story, is meant to teach us of the particular hatred, the particular cruelty of Amalek. It's not that they were our enemies. It's not that they fought us. It's how they fought us. It's the tactics they used. They attacked you from behind. This is well known, but what is less well known is that this word, lezanev, it appears in the Torah, not in the Torah, in the Bible, one other time, and only one other time. And it is not in reference to any of Israel's enemies, it is in reference to Israel itself. The scene is in the book of Joshua. The book of Joshua is the first book in the second section of the Bible called the Prophets. There's a war going on. Joshua, as you know, has to conquer the land of Israel. And 5 Amorite kings are battling against Joshua in the city of Giv'on. And Joshua, with great courage, defends the city of Giv'on, defeats the Amorite kings, and then says this, Va'atem, speaking to his troops, you, al tamdu, don't stop. Chase your enemies. Uzenavtem otam. Uzenavtem otam. Chase them from behind. Don't let them reach their towns, for the Lord your God has delivered them into your hands. Joshua commands his troops using the same words that the Torah used to describe what Amalek did to Israel. Joshua was one of the people who witnessed the attack of the Amalekites. He knew of the Torah's condemnation of it, but orders that the same tactic be used against Israel's enemies. Obviously, the two situations are not the same. One is a battle scene. The other, the story of our ancestors in the wilderness, seems to suggest that we were just wandering, not bothering anybody. So the two situations are not the same, but it is striking that this word, lezanev, only appears twice in the whole Bible. Once in reference to Israel's greatest enemy, the second time in reference to Israel itself. That's the first idea that warns us of a too close for comfort connection between Amalek and ourselves. The second idea, explored in our tradition, is an idea that Amalek is nothing more than a messenger sent to punish Israel for its own sins and its own failures. What did we read in the Zahure reading this morning? Zaĥor et asher asah lecha Amalek b'derech b'tzeitchem miMitzrayim. Remember what the Amalekites did to you along the way when you came out of Egypt. Asher korcha b'derech, you were weary and worn out. Vayizanev b'cha kol hanecheshalim acharecha, they met you and attacked all those who were lagging behind. Ve'ata ayef ve'yageya, you were tired and weary. Velo yarei Elohim, they had no fear of God. There's a midrash that says, read this verse differently. Velo yarei Elohim. According to tradition, those who did not fear God were the Amalekites. But listen to this midrash. Velo yarei Elohim, those who did not fear God, Elu Yisrael. These were the Israelites themselves. Shelo hayu beyadam mitzvot. For they were not following God's mitzvot. What's most haunting about this midrash is that once you hear it, and then look again at the verses, the syntax of the verse seems to demand this understanding. It wasn't the Amalekites who lacked fear of God. It was the Israelites. You, Israel, were faint, weary, and lacking fear of God. And so Amalek came to destroy you. There is yet a third aspect to Amalek that reflects its very close relationship to Israel. From another place in the Bible, the book of Judges, the prophetess Devorah sings a victory song in which she runs through the various Israelite tribes who proved either their bravery or their hesitancy during their wars against Sisera and Midian. She says something interesting about the tribe of Ephraim. Minei Ephraim shorasham ba'amalek. Can look it up, the 5th chapter of the book of Judges. These are Devorah's words. You, Ephraim, your roots, shorasham, are in Amalek. What is she talking about? Well, traditionally, the commentaries say she's talking about Joshua, because Joshua was a member of the tribe of Ephraim. And Ephraim, is true, was the first Israelite to go into battle against Amalek. So she was saying something nice. You, Ephraim, your roots are in Amalek, and so you were brave. But there is another way of looking at Devorah's words. Elsewhere in the Bible, we learn that there is actually a hill in the tribal land of Ephraim, which is called Har HaAmaleki, the Amalekite hill, which some have suggested is evidence that Ephraim displaced Amalek in securing its share of the land of Israel. So when Devorah is singing, "You, Ephraim, your roots are in Amalek," she is saying, "You, Ephraim, your past is intertwined with that of Amalek, our arch enemy." And that is not such a crazy idea. Your roots, Ephraim, never forget, are intertwined with those of Amalek. According to the Torah's genealogy, Ephraim is the great-grandson of Isaac, our patriarch. Guess who else is the great-grandson of Isaac, not through the line of Jacob, but through the line of Esau? Amalek is too. Devorah is singing, "You, Ephraim, are not so far away from your cousin. Remember, the land you sit on once belonged to them." All this to suggest something really frightening, but also something very important. Yes, Amalek can be some external foreign enemy. It is an external foreign enemy. But there are different images of Amalek. There is another Amalek that is closer to us than we would like to think. One of my teachers, Rabbi Ethan Tucker, suggests that Amalek is Israel's doppelganger in history. You know what a doppelganger is? It's the path that Israel did not take. That's what Amalek is. Amalek represents what might have been, what easily could have been, if we hadn't made the right choices. And most importantly, Amalek represents what is still always a possibility if we lose our way. So, this other Amalek that we have to fight, midor, from generation to generation, is the Amalek of our own failures, the Amalek of our own arrogance. It is the Amalek of our own sins. It is the Amalek that gets in the way of us seeing the holiness and the worth of every human being. Amalek is not just some historical people, but a frightening specter of what Jews and Judaism can become if we stray from the right path. So how to show up in shul this morning on Shabbat Zahure? There's no question that we need to be here conscious of Jewish vulnerability and aware of the external threats that we are currently facing. But this year, with humility, I suggest that it would be an act of distortion and moral blindness for me to direct our thoughts to that place exclusively. What happened Sunday night was a disgrace for all of us. And I'm glad that by now almost every major official in the Israeli government has said so. I suggest this morning that we listen carefully to the midrashic reading Avelo Yarei Elohim, the one I cited earlier, as referring to Jews who no longer feel accountable to the demands of God and the demands of Torah, even though they're davening Mariv. Let us look deeply into the mirror that these lessons hold up to our faces and force ourselves, even in our grief, not to look away. This is a year to focus on the Amalek that projects for us the threat of an Israel gone astray and of the Jewish people gone astray. And that is an enemy that only we can slay. Only we can say, Lozo Darkenu, this is not our way of defending the Jewish people. Let's say it. Let's remember it. As we read this morning, Zahure, do not forget. Shabbat Shalom.